gone into the attic of my mind, and I've brought forth the image of what it was like to grow up on the edge of this park, and what it was like to play here and feel safe and feel that I was part of a beautiful environment.
There is something very special about the original tree, the original house or the stone or whatever that fabric is that you can't recreate. Once it's gone, it's gone.
So much of our American landscape has been stripped of its spirit. If we're talking about what it is that we're trying to preserve, it's the connection of people and place.
It has been said that all the facts in natural history taken by themselves have no value, but united with human history are full of life. As much as any piece of art or architecture, our landscapes are part of our national heritage. They are woven into the many layers and stories of our lives, and their outlines remain long after our footprints upon the land are gone. Preserving America's landscape legacy is about the ongoing holistic relationship between Americans and their land. And understanding our connections to the land helps answer some of the most basic questions of our humanity. Who are we? Where did we come from? And where are we going? In art, in theater, and in film, we commonly seek to define ourselves in relationship to the land. Gone with the Wind was the unforgettable saga of a wealthy Southern family and their sprawling plantation in Georgia just before the Civil War, at a time when the entire landscape and culture of the states were shifting. This Hollywood epic brought the names of Tara and the 12 Oaks Plantation into the lives of millions of Americans.
I don't want Tara. Plantations don't mean anything when...
Do you mean to tell me, Katie Scarlett O'Hara, that land doesn't mean anything to you? Why, land is the only thing in the world worth working for, worth fighting for, worth dying for. Because it's the only thing that lasts.
The plantation at Tara was fiction, but through it, a real vision of the romantic 19th century Georgian landscape was created for us by the landscape architect Florence Yock.
Oh, but there, now you're just a child. It'll come to you, this love of the land. There's no getting away from it if you're Irish.
Other great Hollywood classics also offer stunning views of our country at historic points in time. Stagecoach was a landmark film and the first of many westerns shot in Monument Valley on the Arizona-Utah border. Made in 1939, this film is a document to the mythical status and raw beauty of the Wild West. Even Sunset Boulevard ushers us inside the estate of John Paul Getty in the year 1950. Today, that estate, complete with Gothic mansion, is an historic landmark. Hollywood's cinematic landscapes may seem a bit grandiose. In reality, cultural landscapes can range from a small homestead with a modest front yard to a presidential estate and garden. Crowning the top of the rolling green mountains of Albemarle County, the estate of Monticello gazes down over the lush Virginia countryside. Monticello was designed and created by its owner, writer, scholar, master gardener, and President of the United States, Thomas Jefferson.
Well, I think one of the most significant things about Monticello is the long-distance view from the mountaintop. It was quite unusual for him to have chosen a mountaintop on which to build. One visitor said that he had placed his mind, as he has done his house, upon an elevated situation from whence he might contemplate the universe. I think it's a metaphor for Jefferson's vision of America.
Jefferson's architectural ambitions didn't end at Monticello, however. The former president's lifelong search for intellectual freedom led him to the founding and design of the University of Virginia. Both Monticello and the university are great examples of our nation's historic designed landscapes.
We created a small village and called it the Academical Village. It was to be a place where faculty and students could live in direct proximity with one another, but not in the same big building. And throughout the week, throughout the year, share their daily lives as they studied, as they learned. Since 1825, when the first classes were held, we've never been without students and faculty in this place. So the concept has remained alive and well all that time.
With the late afternoon sun highlighting its graceful arcades and crowning its inspired rotunda, the university lawn is regarded as a masterpiece of American design.
It's one of the challenges, I think, right now is for us to begin to document that landscape history so that the university is understood not simply as something of great aesthetic value, but actually as a settlement.
Both Monticello and the University of Virginia are considered historical artifacts. They are kind of landscape museums. Past clues about these places may yet be uncovered, but essentially, the character of these landscapes will remain the same and be preserved through time.
The common sense of people when you say historic preservation is freeze frame. Stop it, put a glass house around it, turn the key in the gate, don't let people in, and try and let it stay there by itself. It doesn't apply very well to historic resources of any kind, but it especially doesn't apply well to land, because the landscape is so alive. I mean, it's composed of alive elements, soils, water, vegetation, and you can't freeze frame it even if you were to try.
Encircling the city of Boston is an extensive ribbon of green, a rich treasure and a pioneering effort in the development of American parks. It is called the Emerald Necklace and was created by the father of landscape architecture, Frederick Law Olmsted Sr. Olmsted invented the American park. His rugged and naturalistic designs are totally man-made and were rooted as much in the idea of social reform as in the hard urban soil. Olmsted's parks were reflections of America's democratic ideal and offered open green spaces and a unifying experience for everyone. Thousands of the Olmsted firm's projects are archived at Fairstead in Brookline, Massachusetts, where Olmsted both lived and worked. The firm's revolutionary designs include the works of some of our country's most notable landscapes, from Yosemite to Central Park. Preserving these archives helps us better interpret the shape of our past.
Part of the job of the landscape historian is to help give people a route back into the importance of that space. We have built our cities and lost green space, but we are regaining it, and regaining it whether it's the restoration of Central Park or the restoration of a small neighborhood node that lets people have a place where they can breathe, relax, repose, recreate, do the things that Olmsted thought were important. That's where our humanity is.
Reading stones has always been a way of interpreting the past, present, and future. Nowhere do we read stones so clearly and interpret so much about our past as in our historic burial grounds. tombstones often mark a beginning and an end. Often what we must seek to understand is the middle. One of the oldest surviving design cemeteries in America is Mount Auburn in Cambridge, Massachusetts. Created in 1831, Mount Auburn is a testament of the time and of the people who lived there. Mount Auburn was also the model for the 19th century park movement. Long before Olmsted's picturesque parks and pleasure drives were carved into the land, Bostonians took their Sunday strolls in the comforting hills of the Mount Auburn Cemetery.
The public flocked here because it was the first large designed landscape of any kind in this country that was open to the public. This was an agricultural area, fields and woods. Here suddenly was this wonderful woodland with ornamental trees and winding paths and roadways, and people came from all classes of society, guidebooks in hand, strolling, looking at the monuments that had been erected. It makes you feel a part of American history just walking around this magnificent landscape.
Boston wasn't the only city endowed with vast and open greens. At the turn of the century, Chicago stood out among the American cities for its progress in civic improvement. In the Midwest, a new appreciation for the regional landscape and its indigenous characteristics was growing. This came to be known as prairie style. Landscape architect Jens Jensen was the leader of this radically new approach to landscape design. The Chicago parks allowed for Jensen to explore ways of bringing his view of the region's native landscape to a naturalistic tradition.
He would go on these long train rides across the Great Plains, and he'd look out the window. And as he would be staring out the window, the other passengers on the train would ask Jensen, "What are you looking at? It's so boring, it's so monotonous." And he would say, "Don't you see it? I see a great spiritual force rising off of the prairie." And so that really became a theme that inspired the rest of his life's work, both in terms of conservation and also his design work as well.
Jensen went on to illuminate the vision of Western Chicago city parks in his renowned prairie style. Jensen's vision for Columbus Park was inspired by the natural history of the site. Jensen was convinced that the site was an ancient beach formed by glacial action. He designed a series of glacial ridges encircling the flat interior portion of the park, a prairie river, and open meadows. Through Columbus Park, Jensen believed that he had come to fully embody the native landscape when he wrote, "Looking west from the river bluffs at sundown across a quiet bit of meadow, one sees the prairie melt away into the stratified clouds above, touched with gold and purple and reflected in the river below. This gives the feeling of breath and freedom that only a prairie can give the human soul." Many of the great landscape architects and designers of the time were attempting to create an experience that was not only uplifting in beauty, but transcendental in natural scope. In 1868, Frederick Law Olmsted and Calvert Vaux set out to design a commuter paradise outside of Chicago called Riverside. The community was to be a kind of suburban utopia. This prototypical village was sculpted out of gently winding streets filled with extensive greens and spotted with generous homes set well back from the streets. Possessing a true pastoral character and a deep sense of tranquility, Riverside was an early, conscious attempt at reconciling city life with the benefits of the country.
It's like an oasis when you're away from town and you drive in after a little absence and get off the busy streets that border us, see all the lush greenery, you know you're home again.
The ongoing preservation of Riverside is about protecting a prototype a successful model of form, philosophy, engineering, and art.
As people move back into urban areas and reclaim them, there's not only this interest in the building, the house, the mantle, the floor, but also the questions you're raising about who planted this tree, what was this garden like, who put this wall in here.
Through the endless alleys of great majestic oaks dripping with soft Spanish moss, the city of Savannah displays itself in a patterned sequence within the landscape. A marvel of perspectives. The rhythm of the city is defined by the relationship of its squares to its long vistas.
Savannah is an 18th century city. It was designed by James Edward Oglethorpe as a utopian colony to actually house debtors. And the plan reflects this ideal in that each ward has a square in the center surrounded by 40 house lots, 60 by 90 feet, so that everyone had an equal landholding around the square.
Like delicate game board pieces, the squares are punctuated by church steeples, cornices, and public monuments, all telling the chronology of the city's evolution for over 2 centuries.
If you take a picture or a painting of a square from the 19th century and compare it to a photograph taken today, there's a particular one on Lafayette Square of children playing croquet in about the 1890s. It's timeless.
In the book, Midnight in the Garden of Good and Evil, John Berendt wrote, "For me, Savannah's resistance to change was its saving grace. The city looked inward, sealed off from the noises and distractions of the world at large. It grew inward too, and in such a way that its people flourished like hothouse plants tended by an indulgent gardener."
Now people are aware that central cores of town need help. There's a whole residential community in downtown Savannah that cares, well, the only thing I can say is passionately. They love it, they want to protect it, they live in it, they enjoy it. When you're in it, you get a lift from it.
Savannah, set apart by its mentality as much as by its marshland, became the first capital of Georgia, with a thriving port, an early railroad center, and a wealthy merchant community. Today, with its historic houses, parks, and squares, this romantic enclave still thrives as a unique and precious designed landscape of the antebellum South. There are landscapes across America that tell us stories of how people lived and how land was adapted to lifestyle. Places in which people continue to dwell and where their imprints upon the land are visible and understood. In these vernacular landscapes, the common becomes special and the ordinary unique. Perhaps the greatest example of vernacular landscape in America is our farmlands. 1 million acres of farmland disappear from this country every year, each acre taking with it a layer of history. We're not just losing the land, we're losing the distinction between urban and rural. We're becoming more homogeneous and erasing the uniqueness of each place.
It tugs at our heartstrings every time we see a family farm going up for auction, because those values embodied in that landscape and that land use run very deep in our culture. However, when it comes to translating that into action in terms of historic preservation of farm landscapes, it is much more difficult for people to make that translation into the real world and recognize that that landscape is itself historic and worthy of preservation as much as a more formally designed garden.
In the foothills of the Blue Ridge Mountains lies a pastoral setting reminiscent of the year 1733, when the town was settled by a Quaker family. The town is Waterford, Virginia, and today is a National Historic Landmark. Just being in Waterford feels like a walk in America's past. Acres of rolling farmlands, hillsides dotted with barns, an old schoolhouse, a village green and a small burial ground. Family farms have been the defining feature of the Waterford landscape since its settlement in the 18th century. But today, land use is changing. Waterford is now standing in the path of suburbanization. The economic viability of farming is slipping, and housing development is in demand.
Preservation in Waterford first was a function of the highway going in one direction and the railroad in the other, and Waterford being left in the middle and abandoned and forgotten. And it was forgotten from the late 19th century into the middle of the 1930s. Just nothing happened here. Remember, too, this is not a museum. These buildings are lived in by people who own them. This is not some place where people dress up in period costumes and parade up and down the streets for the end of the landscape.
If you had these same parking lot, you wouldn't have the Waterford artifacts, and it's that connection on the landscape on for the building.
Waterford is a life-sized history book. It is a unique resource, one that is being preserved and carefully planned for future generations. Encroaching is an issue can happen anywhere. Lush tropical vegetation, cascading water-forested mountain, K&I is a unique and special place on Earth. Located on the rainy windward coast of the dormant volcano Haleakala, known for its rugged pools of taro field houses. The peninsula, its sharp black lava rock, pounded by waves. On land, an ancient irrigation system has which glint like mirrors, reflect changing sky. Much more important to the K&I, a centuries-long tradition and kinship that Hawaiian people have with their land. For them, the taro plant represents more than a cultivation story. It is intimately linked with the Hawaiian creation beliefs, and taro is as native to the land as they themselves.
When the sky came down and touched the earth, the first taro grew. The name we refer to as Wakea, and his that came out born. Now, the next day, upon the grave of Noah, or the child was born, for he received life from people. So to a person of this land, Noah, your older
spans over a 50 on these ownership with the land that has endured changes in history and relates a very special place to a unique life.
They were blessed with eyes, they would never be bored, that they could walk the same path every day.
When you look at this field, what's the first thing you notice? Perhaps the old barn at the edge of the hill, bales scattered around the rich green path. What else? A tree in a, or perhaps an obvious lack of fence in another. There's an old path cut in the ground that starts at the barn but is now lost in grass. The path could have been made from dragging heavy tools and loads in from the fields. Certain types of vegetation that grow here also speak to the values and economies of the place. These plants are not indigenous to the region, but rather were planted and cultivated here for a reason. For centuries before the Europeans arrived, the coasts of Point Reyes, California, were inhabited by the Miwok Indians. Eventually, settlement shifted from original inhabitants to the Spanish and Mexicans, and finally to the U.S. conquest of California. The result was the breakup of the great domains into cattle ranches, beef, and dairy farms. Cattle have roamed the brushy lands of Point Reyes ever since. Herds still graze in its just as Congress intended when it passed legislation authorizing it as a national seashore in 1962.
Point Reyes is a wild and beautiful place that sticks out in the Pacific Ocean like an arrow. When the gold rush hit California in 1849, a number of people found that there was a different kind of gold, and that was the butter they could make out here for the hordes that were populating San Francisco and the rest of California. They called it cow heaven because the pastures were so rich. And so within a few years after the gold rush, the Point Reyes was the biggest dairy producer in the state of California. These original pioneers were supplanted in time by various immigrants from Ireland, Switzerland, the Azores, who came with a vision of becoming a part of America, an American life. They came and worked very hard here, worked on these ranches as tenants, and eventually were able to save their money and buy a lot of these ranches.
Our parents were immigrants from Portugal, and when they came to the United States, and my dad especially, was naturally to come to a better living, to a free country, and that's what he did. He worked hard and he was successful. In turn, we've continued to take care of the land and preserve it so it'll be here for future generations.
Like Waterford, Point Reyes is also a passage out of time, but an active one that continues to grow and evolve with its inhabitants. To unlock the secrets of a landscape, you need to ask some basic questions. What's the history of the place? Who lived there? And who's still around to remember what it was like and help fill in the blanks? The descent into the airport at Long Beach passes over a bewildering and complex landscape of oil wells, light industrial plants, shopping centers, and subdivisions. Sitting conspicuously in the middle of it all is a low hill with a thick plantation of large trees sheltering an old house. This is Rancho Los Alamitos in Southern California. Once a 300,000-acre oasis in the 1790s, it evolved into a family ranch in the 1920s and 30s with elaborate gardens and splendid vistas. Today, only 7.5 acres of the old ranch remain and rest upon a hill only a few hazy miles outside the industrial city of Long Beach.
For the children of Fred and Florence Bixby, Rancho Los Alamitos was a golden place to grow up, where you could have a lot of freedom, but there were certain constraints to be proper as well, so it was balanced, just as the garden was balanced against the ranching activity.
Well, I was born in 1929, and I have my first memories of being here in the late 30s, when I was able to ride a tame horse and do a few things. And we used to come down here and forage around the barns and all kinds of things to do. You could move grain sacks and make forts, and you could jump in loose hay, and you could look at the animals and watch them team up horses behind wagons and ride on the wagons. And ultimately I got a job one summer doing the chores, milking cows and making cream and butter and the whole thing that shore people do. But if you come on this side, you're kind of stuck in a time warp, and you can sort of feel how it might have felt quite a number of years ago when you lived on a site like this. Quieter, you can hear the doves, and you can hear the trees, wind blowing, and it has a different feel than any residential lot you'll go into in the urban areas.
The preservation of the house and gardens at Rancho Los Alamitos is being undertaken with an unusually complete knowledge of what they originally contained. You see, the owners were also quite fond of photography.
Views outward to the garden were very important to Florence Bixby, and it was as though the indoors just sort of flowed outdoors. There was always an invitation to step out. They were looking for dappled spaces, places to sit outside and enjoy a very pleasant outdoor environment with all of the sounds and the smells that come with a garden.
Preserving Rancho Los Alamitos is crucial to Southern California's heritage because it depicts a lifestyle that is long gone in the region. It is an island in a sea of change. But Rancho Los Alamitos is also an example of what could be lost forever. Human connections to the land are also studies in ethnography. Ethnographic landscapes show the connections between a cultural group and a specific place. Perhaps the clearest example of America's ethnographic landscapes is in the relationship between Native Americans with the Southwest of the United States. The canyons of America's West and Southwest are imbued with spiritual significance for the many Native Americans who dwell there. The steep sandstone walls of Canyon de Chelly encompass over 3,000 years of settlements, from the ancient tribes to the Navajo, who've made the canyon their home since the 18th century, and who continue to farm the land, raise livestock, and engage in the rich social tapestry of canyon life.
Canyon de Chelly represents the presence of American Indians in one place from at least 2500 BC to today. And it's that continuum that makes it so special, because you have a modern American Indian population connecting with and interacting with the past on their own terms.
For the Navajo, a waterfall could be important because a beautiful creation story originated there, or because it is associated in people's minds with a special event or ceremony, or even with a certain spiritual being or passage. The place is not only about how it is used physically, but also what it has come to represent in people's minds and spirits, whether that usage is actual or legendary.
My grandmother says that to stay within the four sacred mountains, you were safe, like you were in a home, in a hogan. It kept you safe and nothing bad would happen. But if you go out of the four sacred mountains, then a lot of the older Navajos believed that you had to sing and then do offerings with corn pollen. I grew up in the canyon, and I feel that I have to stay here for the sake of my grandmother and the stories that she told. So being Navajo means a lot to me.
Those cultures that have been in the Southwest for countless generations, they see the landscape, I think, differently than any of us could as individuals, because the histories of their whole people have come from that land. The history is tied to the landscape. The whole history is told through the landscape. The landscape contains the stories of the people, and the landscape in that regard serves as a text.
At the Petroglyph National Monument, it is a gentle rise from the juniper-covered mesa to the 5 large volcanic cones that erupted 110 to 180,000 years ago in this place. Pecked and abraded into the mesa's lava flows are over 15,000 petroglyphs that were carved into the volcanic escarpments by the Indians of the Rio Grande River Valley. The Pueblo Indians have used the locations of the petroglyphs to help guide ancestors from this world to the next.
What we're seeing here is cultural continuity, the passage of an oral tradition, a tradition that could be as old as 400, even 700 years old, passed down from generation to generation. These are more than just images on rock. These are living stories, living deities. We do hear instances of the elders leaving things here for the spirits, for the deities, to feed them, because they are alive. They need to be taken care of.
Together, the sum of petroglyphs tell amazing stories about the world of the Pueblos and our spirit paths that have connected human and spiritual travel for hundreds of years. Much of the Southwest is like a passage through time, with old canyon roads and dusty stories of travel and trade. This is certainly true of the Hubbell Trading Post, a trading post from the 1880s that was also used as a homestead for the Hubbell family. Located along the Pueblo-Colorado Wash, the trading post serviced the Navajo people with provisions and necessities that were traded for wool.
A lot of the elderly still come out here, and a lot of the old memories, I guess, are still in their mind. And when they come here, that memory would slowly come back to them, and I mean, they just remember the good old days.
The trading post is still fully active, with its rug weavers, silversmiths, basket makers, and kachina carvers sculpting statues from the native cottonwoods. The old wood floor still creaks, bridles and bits still sway lazily from the ceiling in the dry desert heat, pieces of velveteen and jewelry still grace the shelves, and the faint smell of horses lingers gently in the air, much the way the Hubbell family left it decades ago.
Because the family continued to remain here from the late 1870s until 1967, this landscape reflects an evolution or a continuum of use, which is characteristic of historic vernacular landscapes. It's messy and dirty, and it shows its history and how it was used, and I think that contributes a lot to the understanding of the place.
But canyons aren't the only kinds of ethnographic landscapes. They can also be unlikely urban spots that hold social or spiritual significance for people. In the bustling city of Atlanta, Georgia, is the birth home of a man of great faith and powerful dreams. A large and simple wooden structure that sheltered the great leader of the American Civil Rights Movement, Martin Luther King Jr. The block of Auburn Avenue where Dr. King was born is preserved to commemorate the life and accomplishments of this great man for the benefit, inspiration, and education of present and future generations. This is the landscape where Martin Luther King lived, worked, and worshipped, and where he is buried.
The picture I would paint you as we look at the 1920s through the 1936 era, when Martin Luther King was a young boy growing up here, it would be a picture filled with vibrancy. It was a community that was one of inspiration to Martin. It was one that influenced him in terms of the beloved community that he spoke about as an adult, a community that he often came back to.
The neighborhood's long back alleys and colorful stretch of porches create lines of communication and social observance that have stayed alive since King was a child.
One of the major objectives through all of the restoration, both physically of the houses and also of the cultural landscape, was to return this area, the community, the birth home block, to a living, breathing community. We have some residents that have lived here for several years that have a frame of reference for what it looked like, how this area has evolved, both during its height, during its decline, and now what we hope is a rebirth.
I remember when Dr. King's father used to live on Houston and Boulevard. And Reverend King and his wife was real young. They lived behind me. And every day they would come to the father and mother house over there.
I think the lesson here is that you can take what remains of a community and preserve the spirit of that community. And it's how that spirit gets conveyed to the public so that when they leave here, they are imbued with that spirit as well.
We will be able to speed up that day when all of our children will be able to join hands and sing in the words of the old Negro spiritual. Free at last, free at last, thank God Almighty, we are free at
last. History plays a great role in landscape preservation, from the homes of former presidents to Civil War battlefields. Historic sites bring to life the story of a particular place in time. Historic sites may also be connected to images in poetry or painting. Places like northern New Mexico, where Georgia O'Keeffe lived, painted and recorded scenes from her life and her relationship with the land. Or Walden Pond, where Thoreau expounded on the delights of man and his connection with nature. But historical sites are most often recognized through their connection to important people and events. Time was when Frederick Vanderbilt could look out over the Hudson and see the bustle of commerce on the great barges and wooden sailboats floating down the river, and revel in the sound of steam and steel wheels passing on the rails below, a sound his grandfather Cornelius Vanderbilt made possible. Like scenes from Currier and Ives, the Vanderbilt mansion sits picture-perfect on the Hudson River in Hyde Park, New York. It is a premier example of an early picturesque style in landscape design by a little-known landscape gardener, André Parmentier. The picturesque style was introduced from Europe and made popular between 1825 and the Civil War. But in few places is it shown so ideally as in these 211 acres. The landscape at Vanderbilt has evolved and matured under the hand of several owners and architects spanning 2 centuries. The estate is one of a small group of virtually intact early 19th century estates in the country. Today, as visitors roam the old deer park, they experience a landscape that predated Vanderbilt himself by over half a century, and one that he chose to live in and preserve.
I grew up in the Hudson River Valley and loved the valley. I identified very much with the river itself. And I think that if anything were to happen to that river, it would in some ways nullify me, but also nullify the hundreds of thousands of other people who also have a relationship, probably similar to mine in some ways, with that river.
Why preserve? We preserve to forge a vital connection with our past, to retain wonderful places in our world, and to extend the legacy of our collective memory to future generations.
I am personally connected to Brandon Station in that I had 2 great-grandfathers that fought here, one in the 6th Virginia, Company C, and one in the 2nd South Carolina, Company C. And I feel very close to the effort to preserve their memories.
The farms and hills near the village of Brandy Station, Virginia, saw much action during the Civil War. The battle there was considered the largest and the most important cavalry battle of the war.
The Battle of Brandy Station was a turning point, being a prelude to Fredericksburg. The Confederacy was totally aware of the ability of the Union to fight, but here we learned that the cavalryman could not only fight, but he could ride.
As during the time of the Civil War, much of the landscape here today is a mixture of pasture, cropland, and woodlands. Although Brandy Station is cited in many Civil War accounts, the area was never mapped out historically, and the war had little discernible physical impact on the landscape. Today, over 6,000 acres of the battlefield landscape have been mapped and defined. They provide a veritable walk through the Civil War history and a powerful glimpse at a strategic military zone in the hands of nature.
People say, well, isn't it just another Civil War battlefield? We already have, a number of battlefields. Why save this one? And I guess you'd say the same thing about, Beethoven, wrote 16 string quartets. Why save them all? Why not just one or 9 symphonies? How many paintings did Rembrandt do? I think each one of these things is terribly important in our lives and to us and to our children and to our country. So they're worth saving.
Period photographs, motion pictures, and correspondence have always been great indicators in documenting a landscape's history. It's not ironic, then, that George Eastman, the founder of the Eastman Kodak Company, left us with film clips that aided in the restoration of his historic design grounds and gardens in Rochester, New York. Short films, such as the one made in 1928 showing 2 great inventors, George Eastman and Thomas Edison in Eastman's garden, verified that features of the original landscape plans by landscape architect Olling de Forest were actually built on the Eastman property, leaving facts for restoration and leaving nothing to invention. But just how do we go about interpreting a cultural landscape? From an orchard's field patterns, we can learn about the people who tended them and get a better grasp of our agricultural heritage. In the same way that museums transfer culture from one generation to another, the elements of a landscape, its trees, plants, fences, and walkways, are comparable to the material collections and objects of a museum. Imagine Yosemite at the turn of the century. Consider the first views of it and the first time people came and saw this national wonder. The whole experience almost transcended reality. Travel greatly affected the relationship Americans had to their land. When tourism started to become feasible for everyone, there were the great myths and wonders of the West. There were the real icons and symbols like Mirror Lake in Yosemite. Tourism came into being for the first time. Suddenly, the whole landscape was embedded with cultural value.
Well, there are those places that are very powerful, but we've had a very significant cultural overlay. And just some would say by the nature of their being set aside as public parks, makes them a cultural landscape. Because as a society, we made a decision, and that decision comes from a certain cultural construct, to put a boundary around a place and set it aside for the enjoyment of all people.
When we look at the sorts of landscapes that were being preserved in the late 19th and early 20th century, they were often landscapes that were still surrounded by very beautiful places, very rural places, unspoiled quite often. I think we're now looking at preservation in an age that is 50 years after really suburbanization starts, the construction of highways, and as a result, the contrast both within these very special places and outside of their boundaries is all the more marked. Because of this, it's not just preservationists coming together, it's people that want to use open space.
Beyond America's great creation myths are the multiple stories of our genesis. And because our landscapes are living, dynamic spaces, the story changes all the time. It evolves. It's a story that is always retelling itself and rewriting itself into our culture. As we have seen, the American landscape is more than a place. It is a cultural mosaic. Yet cultural landscapes will remain among our nation's most threatened and vulnerable historic resources. Though the land is often frayed and faded by time and by misuse, like a tapestry, it will always reveal remarkable patterns of life and of human existence. Our task for the future is to nurture the land and learn the stories it has to tell, its own and ours.